Hello, hey Jay, how's it going, buddy?
I'm really good. Thanks for coming back. Much appreciated. So
Yeah,
we are part four, right? That's where we are now.
yeah,
Um, Time seems to fly, right? So I just wanted to start off with saying thanks so much for all your input with the channel. Obviously, the last video, the undisclosed mission to Chicago, has done really well. So the viewers have really tapped into that one, and I think to go and talk about the draconians, but I guess to say draconians, or let's just say lizard people, right? And some information that I'm getting back from different people now, from maybe some different people that I'm speaking to, when I say draconians to them, they're a little bit like, well, they're just lizard people, right? But either or, it's just nice to have that disclosure from you that says that they are in Chicago, and it's pretty crazy, I think.
that particular time, yeah. I never really, I haven't sat down with my own timeline and looked at when that was.
Yeah.
I would say 86, so that would have been 92-ish,
Yeah,
right in
in that
there.
sort of 4 year Groundhog Day.
Yeah, yeah,
Era.
90 to 94, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
It was about the same, was about the timeline.
yeah,
Without looking back. I've got it written down, and I go back and add to it. That's the best thing anybody can ever do that has any kind of weirdness happen to them is just write it down in the timeline fashion and keep adding to it. So I go back and research, because I do my timeline and I figure it all out, but then I move on and 6 months go and I forget the little details,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Um, yeah, I've done. So there's a couple of bits coming out with esoteric disclosure. With myself, some of my spiritual awakening stuff that's coming soon to the channel, which should be quite interesting. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think at the moment, esoteric disclosure has really had input from you, and we've gone from in a month, we've gone from no subscribers to 140 subscribers, and probably about 8,000 views across the channel. So it's getting picked up really well, and the audience really love you. I mean, we're seeing a lot of interest and activity from the US. I'd say it's about 80% US stuff, probably, and then a little split between the UK and Australia. But pretty much, if you look into the way that disclosure is happening at the moment globally, those three countries are the main focused countries in around disclosure, from my opinion.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks so much, man. Really appreciate it. And I guess where we to start off now is I've got a couple of quick questions actually about just picking your brains just when we go before we go live into you going into maybe the next part of the story. So I've been doing some research. Oh, I'm researching all the time, right? And I was saying to you before we went live that I'm trying to go deeper now in my research. I'm finding that this sort of bubble of YouTube and the disclosure that I'm finding on YouTube is quite limiting in terms of my knowledge that I've already grown. So yeah, I've started diving a little bit deeper. I found some information with some Illuminati um, people that were quite high up in the Illuminati that have now come out of the Illuminati and whistleblowing on them. And one of the key things I think that I wanted to get to bring to your attention was, have you heard of these like cloning stations?
You're breaking up a little bit. Our signal broke up as soon as you
Yeah,
said that a little bit. But
yeah.
you're talking about
Have you?
cloning stations.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, so I have, seen some of that stuff when you look at other people, people say, check this out. They send me articles and things. So I've come across on a few websites where people have come forward and said that there were cloning stations underground around places on the earth, and I wouldn't doubt it. I don't think it's a big. Honestly, I don't think that the process of cloning is that big of an area. It doesn't take up that much of a space. I think that it's a pretty easy thing for them. I think they can print
yeah.
up
We've
a
been doing it since
body
the
in a
40s.
short time, and why wouldn't they?
Yeah, they've been doing it since the 40s. And what's interesting is the Chinese government about to release these kittens that they're about to say that they managed to clone. And what's interesting about this information, and it's interesting that the Chinese government have got to the moon and gone to the dark side of the moon and said, I don't know if you've seen all this stuff. Have you seen this?
Yeah, the
Right?
probe. Yeah, the
Yeah,
recent
yeah.
probe
And
up there, the
that
rover.
stuff's interesting. There's a lot of information that I'm finding out about the Chinese government and potential affiliation to maybe the reptilians, which I'm starting to learn a little bit about, and that leads me on to think why they've gone there, how they've gone there, and stuff. That's an interesting topic, but I don't want to diversify away from these cloning stations, right? So,
Sure.
yeah, from what I've understood is they've been doing it since the 40s, and they have because obviously the reason this came to my memory, right, was because we're talking about you potentially have been cloned to use your consciousness whilst your existing body was left back in the base, and then you went off in this other body, right?
Right.
So as soon as I picked up on that, I had this affiliation back to you, and it seems. And then obviously the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about, which I wanted to do an expose on with you, but you haven't had the time yet to see it, is this new film called Replicas. So Keanu Reeves, obviously, shocked me to have Keanu Reeves as the person to be the main star in this, back from the Matrix, and then coming on to extracting consciousness through a needle in the eye, right? And as soon as Tony, as soon as I saw this video, right, I've watched the film, and it started, and I mean, it's a great film. You've got to watch it. And anybody that's out there that have seen and listened to yours and I's story that we're talking about, to then go and watch this film, it's like, whoa, it's one of those moments, Tony, you know, you're like, whoa.
At some point, I think that they make the movie so it'll debunk people that come forward with the memories. You know what I mean? Like when you come forward and say, I've had so many people say to me when I talked about Mars and the bugs there, they go, "Oh, he's just making up a story based on Starship Troopers because of the bugs." But I think it's the other way around. I think the movie is made up to debunk people that come forward and have memories like, "Whoa, I remember giant bugs out in the desert, you know, on Mars," and they go, so then they make a movie about it, like just like you said, with the consciousness transference, with the needle in the eye, and the dominant eye, like I said. So now there's a movie out to say, well, you know what? He must have got that from. It sounds like he's just copying that movie.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh no,
but you see, from the knowledge that I've got, and from the things that what it makes me understand is it reverses that for me, because of the way that disclosure is happening and the way that the Cabal are working is the Cabal want to. And I say Cabal in really, really loose fashion, because there's much more to it than that, right? And there's entities that go up in its pyramids, and we know all that shit, right? But the point is that they want to bring disclosure to the people. What they're concerned about is by bringing disclosure to the people, it will be reversed on them and used as a weapon. And obviously, because it's been restricted for so long, there'll be so much hatred for people to all of a sudden understand that it's been held back from them for so long, right? And that's their kind of vicious circle that they live in.
Which blows my mind about the Chinese probe, because now obviously the Chinese are if they're on the dark side of the moon, that they, you know, if they have equipment on the back side of the moon, then can see what's going on back there. So they're also they must have some kind of end game where they come out and say, oh, well, look what we found, we couldn't tell you, or for whatever reason that's going to happen. However they plan on doing that.
Yeah. I've got some really good information. So there's been something that's been sitting on my mind for a very long time, and sorry to diversify a little bit. So coming to esoteric disclosure in the next sort of 2 to 4 weeks, at the similar time that we're releasing your video, we've had an inside CIA agent come and contact us, covert agent come and contact us, and go through a load of information with us to clear up a load of things. And one of the things that we had disclosed to us, because I've had this massive problem with the US government potentially using an alien threat as another way of controlling masses, right? So they reverse engineer the crafts, they then go away, fly away in the crafts, come back to this Earth and have a mass war, kill thousands of people, and say, it's cool, we can help you, we can save you, in the same way they're doing with terror and everything else that we know, 9/11 and all those other things. And interestingly, the information that we got from this inside agent was there are governments that, if the US do that, will come out and say that's the fucking US doing that. So, the Russians, so we've been told, have stood up and said, if that happens, we will disclose that you've done it. So it's an interesting concept, and it's something that really concerns me, right? Because I think it would be a dreadful thing to happen.
For a few reasons. Number one, there'd be a loss of life, obviously. Number two, it would be just it would just be a continuation of more lies, rather than an honest effort to come clean with everybody and square up with us. And you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's kind of like breaking the news to your kids about Santa. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like at some point, it's like you don't want them. You don't. From a child's perspective, they don't want to say no. There's not a Santa. There's really a boogeyman. You don't want to come with another story,
Yeah.
that another version of the story, just so you can kind of weasel your way out. It's kind of like you just rip off the Band-Aid, as other people have said, and because people can handle it. The real question is, can they still control us? Can they still keep everybody in line
But
after
the,
age
the
of
point
disclosure?
is, I don't believe that they will, Tony, and that's the biggest thing, right? Is that, but in my opinion already, and I've written this down in some of my poetry that I write, right? And in my opinion, those people need to be imprisoned, but we don't need to treat them inhumanely. Do you know what I mean? That's not what needs to be done, because as through disclosure and through the people that we are, we're not. We don't need to be a violent species. The reason that we're violent is because we have envy, greed, and all of these bad all of these bad feelings about us, and that's been enthralled in us from these people, right? And if we could remove all of these restrictions from us, we wouldn't have all of these things, and therefore we wouldn't need to be aggressive or violent to these people. They just need to be stopped. They just need to be just put away.
Most people are very happy once they reach a certain level of income. There's a certain level of poverty. Once you hit it, people become violent, and
Sure.
it's me or you. There's no race or anything tied to it. It's just there's a matter of time when you can't provide for your loved ones that you have to resort to violence to try to do that. And that's really what's happening, is that we're getting all our money leached off from us, ultimately from the top.
But there shouldn't be money, right? It should be abundance, and we know that there should be, and we know, and if we had free energy, then all of a sudden we wouldn't, everything would become less restrictive, right? And the point is it all exists. And what's crazy for me is that how us as a human species, as a race, I had this, I saw this picture. It's like 7 girls, boys and stuff in Los Angeles, and it says and they're all in a party like drinking, and it says when you go and talk to the people in Los Angeles and tell them that the government have lost $3 trillion, and you get that stare. That
Yeah.
what's the
The
stare?
fluoride stare.
Huh?
The fluoride.
That's it. You get the
Yeah,
fluoride
fluoride
stare. Yeah,
They
like
just kind of look like, huh?
that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like, how are we allowing this to happen, dude? Like, I just the movement.
Well, and the real reason is that people that are doing well in the system, and I say this is this old saying of mine, people that are doing well in the system are going to resist change to the system,
Sure.
right? There's a lot of people right now, a lot of people today that think they're better off than people down the street, and so that
Because
way
they've
I'm
got
doing good.
abundance, right?
Right. Oh no, because they think they have abundance. That's the thing. They really are in debt for the rest
Yeah.
of their lives. Whether they can have the debt covered, that's the thing. The people that have their debts covered for the rest of their life, they think that everything's fine, and the people that are complaining about it are just lazy. That's
Yeah.
that's the myth. But when the reality is, you're in debt for the rest of your life. Your kids are in debt for the rest of their lives.
You're in
It's
debt
never
for the
going to end.
you're
Right.
in debt from the minute you're alive. As soon as you
Yep.
wake up, as soon as you come out and you've been given birth to, you're in debt, bro.
Yep.
Because you
And
owe the
there's
bearer, right?
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of people that have done everything like way they're supposed to, and they still can't cover their debt. Like it's a game of musical chairs, and when the music stops, sometimes the guy that doesn't have a chair did everything right, and so people know. I mean, there's everybody kind of has a feeling in their gut that something ain't right. You know what I mean? Pretty much everybody does, whether you're doing great or not.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I just it's the tipping point, right? And some people are not inclined, and this is because of the way. It's because of the disclosure and what's happened. You talk about witches, and they think about you talk about witches, and they think about Bewitched, right? You talk about vampires, and they think about all the vampire films. They're like, it's not really real. It's not really real. Talk about fairies, they think about Peter Pan. Talk about everything relates back to this disclosure that's happened that restricts you from believing what's actually real, right? Anyway, look, we're just chatting now, so
Yeah,
let's
you're
try.
right.
Let's try and go where you brought back these memories of this mission to Chicago, and we were talking about this Groundhog Day where you're working series. So I guess over to you. And what? So this mission finished. The Chicago mission finished, and you were told that you were going to get this sort of special treatment, or you were going to get a better job, or so. And you said nothing really happened.
Nothing
came
happened.
out.
yeah, I went back to work that day. You know, and like I said, at the very end of it, he made us all piss ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I went right back to work. And that day I finished that, but we didn't go it wasn't like a long day or something. I went back and it was only a few hours, but basically I went right back to my life. I went right back to the same thing. I had a dose of, you know, I don't want to say freedom, but I had a change, you know, like a dose of excitement.
Yeah.
And then it was like back to the same old thing. And like, I remember a couple weeks later kind of falling into a depression about it, that, you know,
Really?
that I had risked all that and nothing happened.
Yeah.
And so what happened, what it turned out was it was a star on my record. So that later, when other things happened, that was kind of like came in, they weighed upon. So it did make a difference later. It may have had something directly to do with me being promoted to cargo engineer eventually, which is where I ended up. But as far as immediate results from that mission, I had none. I didn't have anything good that happened to me from that day. And it was another couple years after that before anything else happened. Before I, you know, as that ship started to degrade, that needed to be fixed more and more. So you know, we were more and more active in our day to day. By the way that happened.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I guess from when I last spoke with you, we kind of got to this place with the 4 years and the Groundhog Day, and that's kind of where I said, do we need to cover anything else inside that space? And then it all sort of came flooding out, right, about this mission to Chicago. So what else is there? And I mean, I think you and I have discussed this offline. What we want to try and do on these videos is bring to people stuff that potentially hasn't been talked about on 15 other channels. So where do you want to go, Tony, and how do you want to progress this story with Esoteric Disclosure, and what do you want to cover next?
I don't. Well, it's up to you. But the next thing that happened was basically the end of that ship. And I tell you, I think about it often. I think about it all the time of what the name of it was, because it was a cool name. It was German for the lightning horse, or it was a German name, and it had a cool meaning to it. And everybody loved the name of that ship, but I just can't remember the words. Like I don't speak German, and so sometimes I look up German words, but nothing's rang a bell.
There was a comment actually about Luftwaffe. Was it Luftwaffe? There was a comment. There's one on a video. Someone confirms that's the name of it. That's it. That's it. Someone confirmed the name of it.
They say that's the fleet that it translates to Dark Fleet, and whatever. I don't fully remember that stuff. Like I said, I can't remember the street names, you know, and
they're on the same.
There were town names, right. But when I went there were places I knew that had, you know, numbers on the wall and street names, and there were town names in there. I don't remember any of it, you know, any of that stuff. Maybe that's a part of the brain, the memory that doesn't have. My memories tend to be based on what the emotions I felt, like times that I felt emotions. I remember those. So it's hard for me to do that, and it's hard to explain to people, to someone that's actually being, I don't want to say skeptical, but someone's being very analytical of what I'm saying, which is fantastic. You know, it's hard for me to expect anybody to believe it for free, kind of thing. So what I'm saying is fantastic, and it deserves fantastic proof. And so it's hard for me to explain to people how the memory process works. Sure. And it's still there's still a lot of things that are vague. There's still a lot that I don't remember. People ask me very good questions often, and I go, wow, I should know that, but I just don't, because it's not something. Again, if it's not something that was tied to an emotional event, it's really hard for me to get to really do it unless I visibly see something that reminds me of it. That's why the Earth stuff, the Seattle stuff, really is a big one to me, because that's provable.
Sure. And have you been back to Chicago to try and identify whereabouts that was?
I've been to Chicago a few times that I skipped through, just traveling from A to B, and I went there once when I think I was 25, and looked around. But no, I haven't been there for the sole purpose of looking for the building, other than look on Google Earth. I've looked for the building, but I haven't been able to find anything that looked familiar. My memories of the building were it's coming out of the stairwell, walking over to a parapet wall and looking down on the street and other buildings that were shorter, and it was a hot day, and then climbing up the wall of it to the top, and then there were a couple towers, like radio towers looking, and big air conditioner units that we had worked on. But that's pretty much all I remember. So it's not like I had a perspective where I could see the whole building at once.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, so the time ended of the 4 years with that ship. Can't remember the name, which is fine. Just before we go any further, you mentioned, and some of the viewers have asked this question, so I should ask you. You mentioned that you're doing a book.
Yeah, working on it. It's hard to do. It's very hard to do. I'm still writing on that. I'm skipping around on it. I'm going to work on it today after our interview more. But what I have to do is write chapters that are far apart, because, like the beginning part where I'm writing about the trauma, the trauma program that was. Yeah, without using strong language, it really screws me up when I write that. When I start to recount the torturous stuff that we went through, and then actually write it down, you got to re-internalize it. And there's plenty of times I even write in the book, screw this book, I'm not doing this no more, because it dredges up those horrible feelings that what it was like going through that. So I tend to mope around for a couple days depressed. I've been writing chapters, and then I'll mope around and feel like it's very hard for me to write things down. Yeah, it is. Maybe there's more to it that they give you, like Jason Rice calls them parting gifts, that they give you to block your memories. They do instead. It's not like they just block your memory and that's it, one shot. They block certain aspects of your memory one at a time with different methods, because the brain is complex. Your memory process is very complex. They don't just have one shot and boom, you forget everything.
If you watch Replicas, in there, what happens when they take the consciousness? When they take the consciousness, what he's able to do is open. So he wears a mask. He wears like what's it called? Like a pair of glasses that go around his head, and then he brings up a screen in front of him, and he can actually physically go through the memories. He can, and then he can choose. Okay, there's that area of that memory in that cortex, and you see him doing it on this what is a virtual reality screen, right? And he can remove certain aspects of their memory. He can remove certain words, certain memories, specifics. It's not one bit or another bit. It's not that clump and that clump. It's like that guy said this to him. That's make it so he doesn't remember just that, right?
So what I remember them doing was we went from, imagine like a big room, like a hospital, and we went from one station to the next. And fine, you were done here, and then they took you and tested you, and then put you into another machine that kind of gave you they were different methods. But the very first thing they did was they made all the faces blurry. So when I think back to Lovers, I can see certain little bits of flashes of their face, but I can see their body, but I can't see their face. In my memories, their faces are blurry. And I asked somebody once, there are other people in forums that I talked to that have been through the same thing. And I said, well, do you remember your people you went to school with? Do you remember the faces of the kids you went to school with you in 5th grade? Can you think back right now? It's hard to remember a face, isn't it?
I can't.
Right, exactly. So that's an easy thing. But what they did was they specifically target and make it to where, like I have a memory right now of my girlfriend walking up to me in that club. And I always remember, because I was always happy to see her, and walking up to me, and I could remember her body, but I can't see her face in the memory. I just can't. Then it goes to color. I know this by cross-referencing, talking to Michael Gerloff, who came forward a while ago, and then he stepped away. He doesn't really want to do interviews or anything anymore, but me and him spoke on the phone a few times, and we talked about the color of some of the reptiles, and I remembered them as blue. And I think blue is a code color that they program you so that they know that you've been through their program. When you start talking about everything was blue, I saw a gray, but it was blue. I met a blue one. That means that you've been gone through their form, because I guess blue is a rare color among ETs. So, but I remember that they made me think that the one reptile was blue. And in my first interviews, I said that he was blue. He was a blue reptile. But after I started doubting it, I started getting flashes like, wait a minute. And it's not that I remember seeing him in a different color. I remember the deprogramming. I remember the conversation I had when they were telling me, you're gonna not remember the colors. And I was like, screw you. I was like, well, big deal. I'm going to forget. What difference of color does it make? When I was telling the guys this when they were plugging me into the machine, I was pissed about the whole thing. I was by that time, after 20 years, and when I really realized I was going back to my life and getting nothing, I was mad at that day. But I remember that conversation about the color. I remember that they're saying, and the one reptile was standing there. He's like, "Oh, I'm going to be blue." And whenever time you think of me, he's like, "I'm blue." How cool is that? Like, he was joking about it. He made a joke with me about it. So when I spoke with Michael Gerloff, he said no because he had one. I don't want to put his. It's not my place to speak for him, but he remembers them being tan, and I went tan colored, and I went, "I'll be damned." I kind of vaguely remember him being tan and not dark blue like I remember it. You're like, so I know that the colors are wrong. I know that a lot of times when I talk, like I say, when I talk about the eyeball that I believe was yellow, I still don't know because they put me through a color. They put me through a color forgetting process or something screwed up, and that's just one aspect. Just like you said in that movie, I'd like to talk more about that movie before I see it. You know what I mean? Because after I see the movie, if I corroborate something, then it's no good. But as of today, I haven't not seen the movie.
So they grow. So they grow. What happens? The concept of the film, and it's one of those situations now where I'm going to tell you, and it's people that haven't seen it, they're going to now base what I say.
Spoiler alert! Yeah,
spoiler alert, dude. Yeah,
for
real. But the basic concept of the film is that Keanu Reeves' family happy, everybody's happy. They're going off on a trip. He works for this. It's an agency that are trying to move consciousness in dead people's consciousness into a robot. That's what he's been trying to do, right?
I'm afraid of that myself.
They majorly, right? I mean, but the reality is that stuff is scary, but they must already be able to do it, right? If they've been cloning since the 40s and it's just come out in this film now, surely they've been doing it for a long time. Where are they using those robots? What are they doing with them? I mean, these are all questions that arise when you watch this film, right? So anyway, in short, what happens is you get to see him with the mask on, doing the consciousness with all the stuff with these guys that are from the army. Basically, they've been killed in battle and into the robot, right? And they can't. Every time they put the consciousness in, because the guy's dead. And then he's like, and then he's in a robot. He's like, goes crazy. They can't calm him down. He like rips the robot, rips himself apart with the consciousness. They have to pull the cord out every time, and it keeps happening. So it turns out that is not actually the government. It's a private agency that he's working for, and the guy's basically trying to make a fucking army, like a private army. Anyway, so that's just later in the film, right? So then basically what happens is he goes off on holiday with his wife and his kids, has an accident, and crashes the car into a lake and kills the wife and the 3 kids, right? So he then rings up his guy that he works with, like his sidekick that he works with in the laboratory, and goes, "Bring all your shit to my house because something's happened." So then he gets all of the bodies, drives them back to his house, and he's got his kids, his wife and his kids laying on the garage floor. The guy comes in with all his equipment, and basically is like freaks the fuck out. Obviously freaks out, right? Because all his family are dead on the floor. And then they grow. So this is the interesting part for me, is that they get some tanks, they get these organisms, they get parts of these people, and they grow them. They grow the humans, right? In these tanks of water. And once the humans are being grown, he's then trying to get the consciousness from the person that's dead into the machine, into the computer. He does that with each of them. They're in hard drives now. His kid's consciousness and his wife's consciousness in a hard drive, ready. And then they grow the fucking humans. And they couldn't get enough tissue for all of them bar the girl, bar for his daughter. So he had to choose one, which is pretty fucking awful. And he just leaves the youngest behind. They grow the people. He sits down, pumps the consciousness into them, and then fucking then they're there laying in the bed, right? There's loads of deadlines he had to get to. Something wasn't working. They basically had to take the woman out, otherwise she'd look older because she was growing in the tank. It takes 3 months for her to grow to the age she was. Had to come out of the tank because otherwise she's going to be older than she was when she left, and therefore the story's not going to work, right? So then basically he brings her out, pumps the consciousness into her, boom, she wakes up, normal person, a clone of herself with the consciousness put in. So then what happens is that they're going to shut down his project unless he makes the robot work, right? So whilst this is all happening, his sidekick is working in the laboratory trying to make the robot work with more of these soldiers fucking dying when they put him in there, right? So he calls him up and goes, come into the office, we're going to get shut down. He then goes into the toilet, Keanu Reeves goes into the toilet, sets up his machine with the fucking needle in his eye and says the robot's going to have my consciousness. That's what we're going to do, right? So then puts the thing on, pumps his eye, takes out the consciousness into the hard drive, goes out the room, and his sidekick's like, dude, why are you bleeding from the eye? And then he's like, well, I'm going to put the consciousness in the robot and me. So he does that. And then it all goes crazy then. And then basically the people that own the laboratory turn around and say, we know you've cloned your kids and your wife. And basically you're going to go away. We're going to kill your kids and your wife. And we're going to take, because you've now succeeded, right? So now it turns out that these guys are actually trying to build an army. They're multi-billionaires that are building an army, and they're like, are going to kill everyone. And then what happens is the robot that he's put his consciousness comes in and just kicks ass. And then what they do is they do a deal, right? And the deal is that the robot stays with the people, the laboratory, and what they're now doing is they're cloning really rich people, and the robot does the operation to put the consciousness into the clone, and he goes off with his family. Then they grow his.
So
they grow his. Yeah, there's two of him, dude. One in the robot, one here. Completely separate of thinking, right?
Now the thing that's familiar is the needle. So they had to, when they did a test with me prior to when they did the procedure, to find out which was the dominant eye. And what it is, he explained it, and I don't remember everything he said, but basically your consciousness roams around inside you. But most of the time, it's right behind your dominant eye. Wherever your dominant eye is, there's an area there that has, where your consciousness spends, like it's a wavelength thing, goes throughout you, but it's there most of the time.
Yeah.
And so they had to find dominant eye, and there was a needle that went in and bang. And then, it's like when you see in Star Wars, like being punched. That's what it felt like. Like you could see it. The other thing was that I don't think there was a hard drive involved. From talking to Randy Kramer, it's your brain tissue. They have to have a piece of your brain tissue. So if they have active brain tissue that's yours with your DNA, made out of your DNA, and it's got an electrical impulse, then they can pull you back from wherever, from anywhere, theoretically through time, even in space time. And this was something that Randy Kramer was talked about, and it made sense that he said that's how they pull the soldiers back. That those guys get their heads blown off, and they bring the head back and clone the rest of the body and put the head on, and they can bring those guys back. So it's scary to me, and I've said this years ago, that I'm afraid that after I die of waking up in a laboratory, waking up somewhere as a some tool, as a tool, but as a slave or some servant.
Yeah.
Like it's really scary because they can keep it going.
Well, this is the point, right? And this whole thing about sleeving, and there's that program, something Altered Carbon, right? That TV series.
Stuff. Yeah.
I actually look. I mean, I'm not going to go for or against Randy Kramer, right? I've watched some of his stuff. This whole super soldier thing, we've talked about that. It's interesting to me. I've not really gravitated to it too much. It's not really pulled me in. I've watched a few of his videos, right? And there has to be this affiliation with technology, computer technology, and consciousness, and the ability. And this is what got to me when we were talking at the beginning, when you and I started to speak, is when you said that they copied the consciousness and they put it into the clone. And then I said, so what happens to you and the consciousness, and how do they store it? And that was right back in the beginning when we started speaking, right? And this whole thing about brain tissue, it seems to resonate more with me that you extract it and you put it somewhere, and once you've put it there, you've got it. And then you can put it in loads, and you can do whatever you want with it, right? To say you're going to go and put it in one, and then it's gone.
Yeah, no. Well, here's the other thing is, so in my regular life, in the year after that, so in the next year after that, there were many times when I went to sleep at night that when I woke up, I felt like I was falling back into my body. And there were times when I went to sleep, and while I was dreaming, it felt like I woke up in my other self.
Sure, that
makes
probably
sense. And I was freaked out. I had no idea. I thought everybody had that. But I was a kid. I thought everybody had weird stuff like that happen when they dreamt. So I didn't really make note of it. But looking back on it now, I can remember kind of, maybe it was something that was more pronounced in the early years of the process. That and I was younger yet. So once I kind of got more into my own identity, that I kind of lost track of it. But there were many times when it felt like I went to sleep, and I would wake up for a minute and then go back to sleep in that body. And I remember falling back, like the sensation of falling back into my body, and I'd wake up. And so that happened a lot in the first year.
Study astral projection.
Yeah, I've studied it, right? But this was something completely more, like a more natural version. I wasn't doing any kind of meditation. I was a kid going out playing, coming home and having dinner and going to bed. It was happening to me on a natural way, not on purpose.
Yeah. So when I was 2, and this is in the video that I've done for myself. When I was 2 or 3, I found myself attached to a cord above my house, flying. And I could see everything around me. I could see my village. I could see my mum and dad's house. See all my neighbours' houses. I used to wake up when I was 2 or 3. And I'd have the string attached to me, and I'd be flying around my house, right? And that happened regularly. And I used to be able to. I got to a point, and this was when I was young, Tony, right? So this whole thing links into telepathy, with my telepathy powers that I have, as well as this whole natural ability for astral projection. And when you're young, your receptors are open, and you haven't had any. You haven't had any negativity put.
You haven't anybody tell you no, you can't do that.
It's not real.
Possible. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's not real, so you can't do that.
You wouldn't even be able to comprehend the fact that you can do it, right? It just happened,
right.
And that led on to later stories and other things that happened, right? But when you're at that age, it's an easy age for you to be able to do things like that, right? And I'm not saying that it's got no affiliation to what happened to you through the program. I'm just saying to you that that feeling of coming back to your body, but for me it was consciousness in the fact that I would go to sleep, my eyes would close, and I would see myself, and I would float above, and it wasn't like I was falling back to my body. I was like, okay, I'm going to go back now, and I'd go back, but I was attached to a cord. Later on, as things went off, I've developed a lot further than that and could go without the cord, right? But yeah, I think it's interesting for you in what you've just said to me, in that when you're that age, natural astral projection happens. And if you were tapped into all of these, you was a what did you used to do? The reason they got you with the drugs was because you
could, like a channeling, like a remote viewing slash channeling ability. Yeah.
And because they tapped into that to you when you were young, and they said, yeah, you can do this. That all links back to your natural ascension that has happened through your many lives, through reincarnation, that have happened, where all of us are in this process, right, from ascension, and we're all growing to a point where what's happened to us in all of our past lives, we're recollecting and being able to achieve in our waking life today. And I believe that we can do all of those things, right? I believe that we can do telepathy. I believe that we can do astral projection. I believe that we can all do remote viewing. I believe that we can all fly through star portals if we know how to open them. I believe, I believe that all these things exist, multi-dimensional travel, and I believe that, unfortunately, we've got so much restriction behind us that, well, I don't believe it exists, Tony. I've fucking done it, so I know it exists.
Well, okay, so if you think about this, so the story is that the Germans, that's how they discovered space flight, was that, Maria Orsic, is that
What's to tell you about that?
was she channeled from from an ET race. She channeled and opened up a communication and got the blueprints on how to build a interstellar craft. So they, after the fact, after that, on a government level, figured out and went out there. Now they're doing things so that nobody else can do that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I'm not a chemist, so I don't know about fluoride, but it makes perfect sense. I don't see why they would. I don't see why they would spend that kind of money to give a shit about our teeth.
Dude,
you know what I mean about the fluoride?
It's a double-sided. It's a double-sided sword. The point is that if we didn't have it in our water, it would fuck our teeth. That's the truth.
Yeah,
our teeth.
Right.
So but it's also, a double-sided sword. But the Germans used it in the concentration camps to dumb down people, right?
Yeah,
so,
and right.
You know what it's doing to your pineal gland.
Well, it stops the ability to channel other ET races and get blueprints for a UFO. You know what I mean? It also coincidentally does that, plus it gives you better enamel. But there are plenty of people that don't have fluoride that have great teeth. And what I'm saying is, and they're spending millions and millions of dollars putting fluoride in for our teeth. Then why not put vitamins in or B12 in our water? Why not put other stuff? You know what I mean? That's good for us. Why wouldn't they do? Why would they stop at fucking fluoride? Why wouldn't they do other stuff? So what I'm saying is, there's a few common denominators that support that theory, that they're blocking any kind of astral ability. The other thing is, when you get into the subliminal stuff that they can do, and a lot of stuff that they can do, like even the binaural technology that I talk about, there's opposite versions of that shuts down any kind of brain, that throws your brain out. There's binaural that puts your brain in touch, left side in touch with the right side. There's also stuff that shuts that down. Yeah. And so that stops. That's why people kind of walk around, can't concentrate, because they're listening to music that has a carrier signal on the back of it.
That's why they changed it to 44 hertz instead of 43. So I've got some interesting information about the Vril Society. Okay, so we talked about the Vril Society, and we talked about how and what Hitler got that knowledge from, and why and how. Right. So it turns out, from the insider information that I've got, and as I said, Tony, everything's taken with a pinch of salt, right? And the things that I've learned from this Agent X that I'm going to research information on, some of it goes against what you're saying. And I think that's important in terms of having 3 or 4 different sides. And one thing that I think is really important to mention here is that everything is in a pyramid, in a hierarchy. And maybe Agent X that I'm speaking to isn't up that hierarchy enough to have that knowledge. And he only knows a certain amount of knowledge. Do you understand where I'm coming from? And everything is restricted and limited in so many different ways, which is why anybody that I speak to, I'm never going to turn around and go, okay, what you said's wrong, what you said's right.
Well, I know from my experience, I was in a need to know basis. I wasn't somebody that needed to know much. I didn't have that kind of rank. So I know there's a lot that I don't know about. When I hear from other people about the other things that went on up there, or other dealings that they have, that the program, I can only tell people what I witnessed from my capacity, and I was a worker. I wasn't an officer, and I wasn't somebody that was privy to sensitive information. I didn't have the choice to go anywhere other than where I was told through the whole time. So you got to believe. I don't believe that any one person knows anything. There's talk about people know all the names and everything of what was in the whole fleet. That's BS. There's no way that's true. There's no way that's true. I'm sorry. I'm not buying it. This is a top secret fleet with space travel that are fighting psychic infiltration, as well as technical artificial intelligence infiltration. There's no way they put all their eggs in one basket. There's no fucking way. You know what I'm saying? They say that there was a hard drive taken that had everybody's name and all the bases and everything. That's bullshit. There's no way that's all in one hard drive.
I get it.
The other thing I want to touch on. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say about the Vril Society and the fact that it turns out that the research that I've done, there's the reptilians. There are different names for the reptilians. One of the reptilian breeds is called Vril.
That sounds more familiar than anything.
And what it is those people that Hitler funded, they weren't. That's not just women with long hair, dude. They are the reptilian race. That's actually them, dude. What they've done is you'll hear of the technique of the reptilians being able to go through the eye into the spine and overtake that person, right? And become that person. So the real reptilians have gone inside those women and they've overtaken them and been funded by Hitler to give him the information.
Well, it's the first I've heard of that, but
I'm
honestly,
putting that together myself, Tony. Right?
Yeah,
So
honestly, the first guy, there were a few conversations. The guy in Seattle, the billionaire that owned me in the first place, his wife, who got treated really bad, said that there was a time we were watching a movie. I won't go into it, but we were watching a movie, and at the end, there's an ET, and she kind of hinted that that's what he was. That he was an ET. That his consciousness wasn't human.
Yeah.
Because he acted totally different, and he was the one that was into sacrifice and eating people and all that. And so I believe that that's exactly what I think that makes perfect sense with what I remember of that guy.
Yeah, there's loads of YouTube videos on it. I can potentially put in some. There's a specific YouTube video that I've been watching with an insider from an Illuminati that will Okay, I'll say the name of the channel. The channel's called Stranger Things. It's actually a magnificent channel, and the poor guy has just had this. You've just seen this Article 11, Article 13 stuff that's come out where you copyright videos with the music and they're going to delete all your videos, right? He had something like 30,000 videos on there. It was funding his life, and they've deleted 3/4 of his channel, and they've taken the monetization away from him, so he doesn't get paid anymore for his channel, right? But there's a video on there, and this guy really goes into a very deep description of how the lizards go in and go through your spine and overtake everything about you, and then they become you, right?
Wow. Well, that goes in with what I've heard. Like, imagine if, like in my case, when they took me out of me, they could have put somebody else in there.
Sure.
You know, It's the same technology. That's what we're talking about here. You can look at all the uses of that. Like we're talking about that movie, the Keanu Reeves movie. You look at that scenario that just ran through the movie is one thing that could happen, but there's so many uses for that when you're talking about separating someone's consciousness from their body and being able to swap them around. You know, like software. Once you can do that, I mean, the amount of things that you could do are pretty staggering. You know, the number of different uses you could do for that, let alone just cheap labor, which is what I personally was.
Well, they're saying in the research I've done, they're saying they've done it with all the pop stars, they've done it with most of the presenters, they've done it with. They're saying that like a good 30% of the population it's happened to, and they're clones, and they've got the original people back.
Yeah, I believe that certain people that get invited to those parties, like the same ones that I went to, we were doing in Seattle for political reasons. I think that the stars go to them. I think once somebody gets on a certain level of fame and they go in, and if they don't comply or they go there and go, what the fuck? They go, whoa, what the fuck is this? You know, and you can see it because there's a lot of stars. I don't want to name any publicly and get some kind of lawsuit or something.
I don't give a fuck. Jim Carrey's one of them.
Yeah, right. They're cruising through their career, and then they change. They have a completely different mentality.
Jim Carrey, Britney Spears, Beyonce. Yeah. There's a long list of them.
Right, man. You can see them, and all of a sudden they crack, and they're like somebody else, and they got somebody else telling them they always have, and then they come with some kind of fucking identity, like, no, yeah, when people get me down, I just change my name as Super Awesome. You know what I mean? And they have identity splits, all that going on. I think that they get put through a trauma, mind control, or taken over, like you said, maybe. But I think that they get brainwashed out of. They go to these parties and witness some real shit, and if they don't comply, then they get the brainwashing.
You know what's so fucked up about this? Yeah, is that what I'm hearing and what I'm finding out about this information is we're talking about Britney Spears being cloned more than 150, 300, 400, 500 times. We're talking about high Illuminati members having a Britney Spears, dude, and just doing what the fuck they want with them.
Put yourself in their shoes. That's the other thing. Okay, so I've said that I've had many people ask me why. How could they do this? Be so cruel to you, Tony? Like, a lot of people empathize with what I went through, and I say, wait a minute. And I even said this in a talk. I said, I would do the same shit. I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready for this kind of technology to be at my disposal because I grew up in a world without abundance. I grew up brainwashed that there was no abundance, that there was energy. I grew up in that disparity. You know what I mean? There was less love, less everything material. So that all of a sudden, if I had the ability to have not only anything I want, but anyone I want, to just somebody piss me off, I could clone them and beat them up every day for a couple of days and then put them back and nobody would know it. Why wouldn't you? You know what I'm saying? Or some girl you had a crush on that dumped you, take her and brainwash her where she loves you and is a sex slave. That would happen. Why would you get what I'm saying? Like it's a powerful thing. We're not our society, our level of development isn't ready. Most people walking the earth today, if they had that kind of ability, would abuse it. It would be a slippery slope.
And there
You
is
know,
the
once you got into
therein
that,
lies the
once you got
problem.
into that habit, you know what I'm saying, Jay? I'm not calling you names, but even you, buddy. You know, like if you had the ability to just do whatever you wanted to anyone you ever wanted, sooner or later somebody would either piss you off or provoke you to do something that really isn't moral, just because you can. And then on top of it, here's the kicker: they wouldn't remember it anyway. They
So
wouldn't even fucking
that's
remember it.
fantastic.
They wouldn't even know. It's just for you to. It's just make a puppet out of somebody and do what you want, and then throw it away,
The
and
prime
nothing bad
example of
happens.
this, yeah, dude. And the prime example of this is I'm just going to spin it on its head, right? So if you go to Holland, so I lived in Holland for a year, right? And the Dutch people, the young Dutch people, okay, don't smoke weed, dude. They don't even care about it.
But it's legal.
80% of those, because it's legal, dude. And this is, and right?
Right.
And this is the big thing here. You've hit the nail on the head, right? What you've said is that I was brought up without free energy. I was brought up without abundance. I've got hatred. I've got evil. I've got greed. I've got this internal hatred for the world, dude. And that's a byproduct of these stupid fucking idiots that have created this restriction in disclosure. And the point is, Tony, is that there's a master plan, and that master plan doesn't involve us. It really doesn't.
Right.
And that's the bit that people are missing here in this scenario. And where I'm going with esoteric disclosure is obviously it's fantastic speaking to you, right? And it's fantastic getting to know your stories. And where I'm going with this, and the message that I'm going to bring out is when you watch my story, and I have sent it to you. I know you're slam busy, right? But the message is that I died and I came back, and when I died, I found out that when you die, you don't die. So the biggest lie in this whole world, and the thing they use the most against us in fear, is that you die. So if you go and you take a species aware of being killed, right? You go and take them and put them in a room and put a knife at their throat. They're just going to go, oh. Right. And then you stab them and they're like, oh, but they don't, because they don't know what death is, right? But then you take a guy where you say, when you die, it ends, finished. And then you take him in a room with a knife, the geezer's going to fucking freak the fuck out.
He's going to comply.
So, yeah, and you know, we went back, I'm going back and I said, why as a species do we allow this to happen, dude? Like, this is the big thing, is, and it's crazy, this loop that's happened, and where we are today is, and I love the fact that there's all this stuff coming out now, about all this other weird fucking alien shit, and cloning, and you know, the stuff that I'm disclosing about, you know, spiritual awakenings, but it's all coming out fast. Are you noticing this now? It's
right. It's hard to keep up with, and there's so many different angles of it. I'm still on the fence. A lot of people have it into a good and evil kind of thing. Like there's good ETs, there's good guys and bad guys are fighting, and you know, like they say that, like you can see that they're promoting a lot of other new things. The kids today. They're promoting homosexuality. They're coming out. They're legalizing marijuana. They're legalizing other things all across. You know, there's different things that are being. The society is being pulled in different ways. But I don't think that necessarily there's an evil agenda versus a good one. And that there is an evil agenda and a good one. You get what I mean? Like I think it's bigger than that. I think that they're bending society to be more like to be able to handle the diversity of the knowledge of extraterrestrials. Because up there's so many different cultures now. You got to think. Now, and the other thing that cracks me up is people go, there's 4 races here on Earth that are working from space. There's 4. That are doing so, or 5, or there's 10 races that come and visit here regularly, and you know, like there's these guys and these guys, and that's it. That's not true either. There are billions,
of course there is,
billions of races and they pop through our neighborhood all the time, billions, and they all have their own different thing. You know, like they all have their own different cultural thing that may be disgusting to us, that may seem disgusting, but really it's just their culture. Because We're just programmed to believe that we know what we're doing
We eat
by living a
cows,
certain way.
they eat humans.
Exactly. I mean, is that it's like when you point the finger at them and look evil, it's very easy for someone to point the finger at our society, and you know what I mean, and say make us look bad. They
So
can make us look really bad. So, like, there's no morality. I, personally, this is pretty weird. I think I'm the only one that feels this way, but I don't think plants are that much different than animals. So I don't think there's a morality in vegetarian over killing an animal because the vegetable is still alive. It's still something that's alive. You basically are killing something to stay alive, no matter what you're eating.
so
You get what I'm saying? Like,
if you
there's
if
no
you
high
watch,
ground.
sure, and look, if you watch the Law of One, and you learn and you study the Law of One, which I've done, and this brings you into densities, dimensions, and
Which I gotta say, I really agree with a lot of the Law of One stuff that
totally
I've read. I
right.
haven't read it all, but I really agree with it.
But so if you look at this, before we ascended to the second dimension, before we ascended to the third dimension, we were either plants or animals,
Mm.
right? And then no, plants in the first dimension, second dimension animals, third dimension where we are now
The
as Homo sapiens,
density. Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
what you're saying is right. They still have a soul, dude.
It's the same difference. Exactly. It's the same thing. Or, you know, and I don't think it's a good, right, like I'm not promoting this, but to kill somebody else too. I mean, there's an ultimate choice with every meal. Are you going to stay alive and kill it? And you know what I mean? Are you going to eat something that's alive to stay alive, basically? And some things obviously are more terrible to kill than others to live off of. But the fact is, we're all kind of locked into that. That's part of the comes with the territory that you got to eat something that's alive, that was. So there's no moral high ground as far as I'm concerned. And you know, as much as I don't want to be food, you know, if you were reincarnated, if you were lived as an animal at some point, you were food. You were food for another animal. The animals kill each other constantly, and people want to stick up for them. You know, like as if the moral thing. But that's what I mean. It's not as big of a deal as what we. And like you said, when you die, you don't die anyway. Right?
Definitely don't.
Right. You don't die anyway. So to kill an animal really. It doesn't die anyway. It just comes back as another animal, or or something better, as a human eventually. You know, once it remembers and it has an identity. Once it remembers that it's an individual, it comes back as a human. You know, so it doesn't matter when it dies or how it dies. It just happens. I don't know. We're starting to get deep, starting to get off track, but you know, I feel that way. And you know, somebody also asked me a long time ago. They said, you know, after they heard my story about going through the slavery and like suffering, you know, the trauma of it, and how other people. They said, why do people have so much trauma? You know, why do people choose to suffer in this life? How could you choose to suffer if there's a free will thing? Like you can deny your life. You can say, no, I'm not taking that. Why would you do that for suffer? And my answer was this: it's only 80 years. You're talking about an eternal being. When you're dead, you become back to damn near eternal or eternal, an eternal being, and they go, hey, look, you're going to suffer for 80 years so that you can come back and be better off next time. You know what I mean? Like when you look at it like that, but then it almost takes on a religious aspect. So I don't like to push that on anybody. But I just kind of brainstorm, you know, and just thinking about it objectively. If that's the case, that we're in a reincarnation thing, then it's a shortcut for some people to suffer greatly. It's a shortcut to a better reincarnation.
So, I like what you said, and yeah, let's just finish this off, and then we'll go back into your story. Dude. But so, your incarnation's about your experience. This dimension is an experience dimension, right?
Right.
The idea is that the other dimensions are shorter in terms, are longer in terms of your stay. Okay, much longer in terms of your ascension, right? And you get to choose to come back here to gain more experience before you go up to another dimension when you die. You can, from my knowledge and understanding, you can only ascend to another dimension after death.
Right.
There isn't this whole,
which cracks me up about people thinking their DNA is going to get upgraded and they're going to turn into superheroes.
All that
kills me because you know the main ascension. from history of the Law of One, like when the Mayans ascended, it was a mass murder event. That's what all that was on the pyramids when they were cutting their hearts out and stuff. They were ascending at the same time. They whacked them all at once.
Exactly.
That's what that is.
Exactly.
It's a mass death.
And if you get these people saying that they're fifth dimensional beings and let me spiritually awaken you, and they charge you to go and talk, all that's just pony, man, in my opinion. But so like when you die, you get this point of experience that says, do you want to go back and experience more? Because once you go up into the next dimension, the difference in the way that you experience and who you are and what you are is different. You take those experiences and they form part of your ascension to the next dimension, and they form who you are and how you ascend, right?
I believe you can come back as well. I believe you can live one of those lives in a fourth density and come back to a third density to either
you can always go right up to the 9th and 10th and come back, dude. And this is the truth, but when you get up there, you probably wouldn't choose to come back when you get that far, right? But it all depends.
I wouldn't want to be a bug right now. I wouldn't want to die and then come back as an
no. Yeah, and then have to go again and then go. No, exactly. Okay, look. So there was a couple of things that you said that you wanted to pick up on. I can't remember if you remember going back to it before because
we've been chatting today. Yeah, this is a good chat between us, everybody. So I don't know if you want to go farther in the story.
So before we got into the real thing, you said there was a couple of things you want to hit on. Can you remember what you was going to say?
Oh man, not off the top of my head.
Okay, don't worry. Let's take it from the top and let's go. So I think we should crack on. So outside of this mission that we did in Chicago, right? Was there anything else that you want to disclose to Esoteric Disclosure viewers that happened in the interim of you finishing with that ship and then going on?
Just what happened. What happened was a couple years later, that ship really started breaking down. And a lot of the fluids, there were pipes. It was like a submarine, so there were pipes and everything. And a lot of the fluids were highly corrosive. That was the thing. There were radioactive fluids that went through. Very few, but there were a few systems that had radioactive fluid. I want to say water, but it wasn't. It was a different solution, but it was radioactive. And there were other fluids that went through it that were highly corrosive, that corroded the parts of the ship. That the pipes that they were carried through weren't made to carry, because it was a submarine that got converted into a spaceship and not vice versa. It wasn't created to be a spaceship. So we had to constantly cut sections of pipe out and replace it with new pipe, and valves. The valves especially would get corroded and stay open. So we had to cut them out and put new ones constantly. Now it became, first it was like once a week, and after a while it was like all day long. That's all we did was cut stuff up. Towards the end, when that ship failed, I got injured. It was on a mission, and that's how I ultimately earned my promotion. And they decommissioned that ship on a mission. And there was some time. I always said it was a couple of months, but it was longer than that. It was like 6 months that the new ship was still being. It was built and then brought to series, and then it was refitted. Like while it was in dock, they were working on the ship. And so we as crew went on it when it was just sitting there and worked and got to learn our jobs. And we went to meetings on it and all that, and all that. We went to school for it while the ship was there, and it didn't have a name yet. And I think that's why I remember the name of it, because of the first word Max in it. That I hated the name, to be honest. They tossed around, they had votes for different names, and I hated the name Max von Laue. Because the very end is Laue or Laue. Like the way they say it in German was really, I couldn't say it, and I hated it. It was the Max von Laue. But and that was the beginning of that. And so ever after that, when I went to that ship, I had a promotion. I had a much better life. That was the end of that suffering. That really the Groundhog Day. It ended at that point, and I became really more of a crew member instead of somebody that worked down in the pit, that never had any interaction, that did something. I actually had an active role in ship operations, or at least more active, and it was a much more, dignified form of slavery.
Was you still in Sirius, still in the prison block?
In Sirius. Now, the other thing that's what I want to touch on, was that earlier you said that, and we won't name names, but you said that you've talked to other insiders that say that Sirius was uninhabited.
Yeah. I haven't touched on. I haven't said this live, but yeah, yes.
Sorry,
it's,
man.
it's cool,
Sorry,
it's cool,
let that
dude.
out.
Yeah, it's cool.
But I want you to know that it was talked about often. When we would fly over the surface at times, and I remember asking people, real crew members, people that were free, for lack of a better word. They weren't free, but they were people that were more in the know than I was. And I asked, is there anything on the surface? They had nothing visible on the surface of Ceres. And the reason they wanted to stay hidden, not only from probes, from other programs. There were other programs that didn't know they were there. The Germans were there. And they had treaties that said, don't fly next to Ceres. Other ETs would say, that's ours, you can't go near it. And that's how they did that. They made it an off-limits thing. Like, we own it. It's our business if we do anything there or not.
I think you said about crevices and stuff they built the bases in, or was it under the ground?
They built well, what it is they're called cold traps. And there are craters where the sun never shines inside the crater. So there's still water there, where, just the orbit there's always a shadow. The doors that went into the main hangar, the sun only shined there for a couple weeks a year, for an hour a day or something like that. It was a weird place where it was and they said that whoever put it there was a genius, because the Germans had in fact found that base and those doors, that whole mechanism for the doors to open and close. Some other ET race had built it. But there was a tower on the backside. There was a little tiny, like maybe the size of a telephone pole tower, and it was like a radar thing, or it was some kind of radio instrument, but it didn't give proof of any of the bases or anything that was going on inside the planet. So, but just so you know, I just wanted to go ahead and confirm that other programs up there, they were trying to, because, and the other thing was, if they went out of the solar system and did a mission and robbed or created pissed off some other ET race, when they went home, they didn't want their address to be known. In other words, they wanted to come back to our solar system and then go back to Ceres and be hidden. And so that other ET race that followed them here would come to Earth and go looking around, going, who took our stuff? And they kind of had that kind of strategy in place as well. It was a defensive measure to hide the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, this leads on to other stuff that I've found through this disclosure from this guy that I'm talking to, in that there are canyons the size of the Great Canyon in America under the earth, under Los Angeles, under various other places. Interestingly, some stuff came up about the mantids, right, in this conversation, in that what we were told is that there's a massive area under Los Angeles that these mantids, and he called them something else, and I called them mantids, and he was like, I've got to go away and find out what you're saying, and came back and was like, shit, that is exactly what they are. But according to them, there's a whole race of them that have come here, and they've given them one of the canyons under Los Angeles for them to live in, and they're having trouble communicating with them. And my immediate reaction to that was, if they're telling you that they can't communicate with you, they're lying to you, dude. Like, because from the information I know about these mantids, these motherfuckers are pretty fucking switched on in being able to talk to you, right?
If they wanted to talk to you, you would be.
That's my point.
Right, yeah. Right. It's not because there's a tech diff. Oh, well, who knows what goes on down there.
It might be a different race, a different species, right?
Our ship, we would drop off, we would deal with cargo. What it was we were taking cargo that one of the inner Earth civilizations wanted to take to some place that they weren't allowed to go by treaty. In other words, imagine if an American couldn't go into Russia, right, back in the Cold War. Imagine that situation. So they would have somebody from France that did have access. They would give them something, and then they would take it into the zone where they want. That's what we were doing for an inner Earth race. And the Germans really coveted the Germans. Yeah.
Remember the name Skunkworks?
Skunkworks, yeah. The Germans really coveted anything. The inner Earth people could fly through stone. They could fly straight through stuff.
Yeah.
And so the entrance, there was no real entrance to their cavern. The Germans could go down. There was a place in the Catarina Mountains where we could go down inside of a hill, and you could see the sunlight. I remember looking up. There was water falling, and you could see the sunlight up this hill with plants growing, but it was dark. It was inside a cave, and we would park our ship there. It looked like a man-made ledge. It was smooth, like a ledge, and it was huge. I mean, it was thousands of feet long by thousands of feet wide, and it dropped off into a dark chasm, into nothing. When you were at the edge, you looked down, it was just darkness. And their ship would come up out of that. And what they said was that it was basically nothing down there, that they flew through rock to get to us. And the Germans, the Series Germans, were dying to get their hands on some of that technology.
Bet they were. I bet they were. Okay. So this new ship, have you done this, what's it called?
The Max von Laue.
Max von Laue. So where have you gone? Have you gone? I assume you've gone really deep with this with other channels, right? About this. Is this the?
A little bit.
Is this the new? Is this the? Because you said that there were newer ships that you got to later on. Is this the newer ship that you got to? Is this what you're saying?
Yeah, I was on it for, I want to say 2 years. It might have been, about 2 years. My last 2 years there was about the time that I was on that ship. And so then I was discharged. My end of my 20 years was up, and it was still going. But I never saw the whole thing in one. I never stood outside the ship and saw the whole thing. There was a time. Well, there was one occasion where I was in a lift and I came down on the front of it, and the front was like a triangle, and it rounded back, and it had a tower in the middle of it that was under construction. It had a bunch of scaffolding up in the. Like it had a triangle front, which was beautiful. It looked like a stealth. It was the same color as like the stealth bomber. It was a bluish black, and it was round. It had rounded edges, no real sharp edges, and it looked like a stealth thing. So it had like a low radar profile. But in the center of it, in the front, there was scaffolding and a crane working there. They were building something on it when I saw it. But I rode an elevator down. I rode a lift down, and a guy gave me a ride in like in a little car that showed me where my cargo bays were. They wanted me to see it from the outside, my cargo bays. And there were other times when I got to get off. There was an elevator thing that dropped out of the ship, like a lift that would hold, I want to say 4 people at once, 3 or 4 people in worth of weight. And it went down on its own, and that's how we got, because it was hard capped at 10 meters above wherever it was. The ship's computer would never let it get closer than 10 meters to whatever it was over. It always, 100% of the time, floated 10 meters above the ground or the water or whatever it was. It could go underwater. But there was an elevator that we rode up and down when we landed places.
This is not a submarine, right? This is totally different.
No, it was completely made to be a cargo ship, and that's what it was. There were front decks that were much different looking on the inside than the rear decks and the lower decks that turned into a more industrial looking place. And I would do meetings at the front. There was a briefing room behind where the captain and the officers worked. There was a briefing room there, and it was a white room with a white table and chairs. And there was like a little food replicator there, and there was coffee, and you could have there was a little galley at the end of the room, and then you would walk and I took a carpeted hallway that was carpeted, and it would go all the way back, and it got narrow as you got farther back in the ship until where eventually you had to stand aside and let somebody go by, and then there were ladders to go straight down, and I remember 5 decks. There were more than 5 decks, but I remember I personally went down 5 decks. To my deck, and then I had 2 decks that I worked on. I was above. There was a cargo bay that was on basically the port side of the ship. I had 2 cargo bays right there that I worked on in my office, or my workstation, which wasn't an office because I had to stand up, but I had a workstation that was above the cargo bays. So there was a staircase at the end of the cargo bay. There was a staircase, and then there was a room that went across, and the same thing, and that's where I worked.
And so, what was your job title? Did they give you one?
I was a cargo engineer.
Okay. And you stayed on that ship doing various different missions for about 2 or 3 years, you say. And was that still missions that you go out and come back like 9 till 5? Is that still the same?
Yes. There were times when we got stuck and we were out a long time, like 16 hours, 12, 14 hours. We did long days.
Yeah.
But basically, we always went home. We never went out and stayed for days or stayed overnight anywhere. We went back. We went there and came back, and there was always a really tight schedule. They before we left, they had everything scheduled and to the T. So there were sometimes there were things that happened that were weird that we went back at different times, but we always went back.
Sure, sure. And did you start to earn a salary now?
Yeah, and well, not in the beginning, not until eventually. I guess our first couple missions, the first couple trips we did well, and it generated income for them. And so the mission briefings that I went, they voted on it, and they gave me an income, and it was small. It was like $20 a week worth of money. It was
This
enough to get on the train and go into town, and it was enough for me to ride around and explore the colony. Which after the first time I did it, I got beat up, and other times that I went, it was pretty humiliating to be a slave. I wore a slave collar,
Follow, yeah.
and so it was a humiliating experience for me to go into a urban center of town. People didn't want to talk to me, and the people that did talk to me were pretty degrading. So I didn't really enjoy. A lot of people say, "Well, what, why didn't you go to where everything was nice?" I was afraid of those places because all it took was one person that was a little bit sadistic to pick on me, and they could do whatever they want. They could beat me up. They could take my stuff. I had no rights. I was living in a society that I didn't have any kind of human rights.
But they're
So I
human.
kind of what?
They're human.
Yes, yeah. There were humans, and there were two other races that were there permanently. They were tall, and I only saw them, in the red light district. They were there, and I saw them, in the mall. I would see the 7-footers with the long hair pretty often, and they were in the hangar base. That's what they did basically. What they were good at was building smaller craft or doing the craft maintenance, the engines on the craft. They did all the maintenance.
They're blonde.
They were all different colors. So they had long, straight hair. I think I sent you some of the artwork before, but they had long, straight hair. They had elongated skull, bigger eyes, and they had kind of weird proportions to their arms. And they were about 7 feet tall, 7.5 maybe.
Did you sent me some pictures? You haven't sent me pictures of that.
I'll send you one of them. I have an artist representation that looked pretty good. Anyhow, they had always had straight hair, perfectly straight hair, but it was all different colors. So I don't know if it was artificial how they did that, or if it was a different thing between them. But you would see one with orange hair, you would see one with blonde hair, black hair. They had many different colors to their hair. It was a thing of their culture.
Okay, so you went into town. You see them as being a few different races plus humans.
Mostly human.
Mostly humans. Yeah. And so, in terms of these missions, I mean, what do you want to try and go through with me that's maybe different to what you've done before in the past that will make it so it's something that's fresh and new from the
something new, something that I haven't covered before.
Yeah.
Well, there was one mission where somewhere in the front of the ship they had redone one of the cargo bays on the ship and put it what they called a double disc in there. And I've spoken of this mission, but I didn't really go into details about it. But it looked like think about your standard UFO, your disc.
Yeah.
And it had a longer bottom, but it was it was an oval shape.
Yeah.
Like a disc, and it had a longer bottom, and it was a cargo. It was more like a truck. And it was an experimental craft for the Germans, for the Series Germans that they got from somebody else, and it was supposed to be super fast, without jumping or going light speed or faster than without interstellar travel, just from A to B. That it was a very fast ship. And the mission it was another one of those missions where we volunteered. There was high probability of it was the same situation, the same deal. Like you could die on this mission, or you could get rewarded. And so my name was still on that list, so I accepted it. And again, and this time it's not that I wanted to die or I felt terrible about myself. I just was looking for the promotion,
Sure.
And I wasn't scared because of the first time. So what they did was they rounded up a bunch of us off the ship. They gave us uniforms as if we were actual officers and not the slave crew. And they put us on the ship. And what it was somewhere out there, it was a reptilian race. They were black in color. They were taller and shiny. It was a shiny black, their scales. And it was oil. the planet was bigger. It was a heavier gravity planet, and it was a desert. And I remember it well. We stopped, so we got on the ship and we flew. We left out the MVL, and we flew down to this planet. And we had trained for, I want to say, 3 or 4 days prior, maybe as much as a couple weeks, but 3 or 4 days spread out over a few weeks that we trained what we were going to do. And what it was, they sold oil or different kinds of chemicals that they were mining out of this planet. They were welling on this planet, and one of the oils they wouldn't sell to us, and it was something like 500 times more potent than oil. Then think about our crude oil. It was like our crude oil, but it was 500 times more potent. So so 1/500th of a gallon of gas would be that kind of energy that it had. So they wanted to acquire that to see if they could synthetically make it and use it somewhere on Earth or for them. And we flew down and we stopped on a like a cliff, like an edge, overlooking a desert. And we got out, and the guy in charge said he wanted us to get used to the gravity, because it was heavier, and he wanted to test us and see how fast. Because they were all nervous, because if they caught us we were going to steal from them, and if they caught us stealing, we were going to be killed. It was that simple. And so even the guy in charge, who was an officer, we had a couple, like 2 or 3 guys that were officers, and there were probably I want to say 15 of us, a dozen to 15, maybe even 20 of us on that. It was less than 20, like 15 of us. And so 3 of them were real, and the rest were slaves. And they were nervous. So they wanted to stop and time how long it took us to move stuff around and make sure that in the heavy gravity he had the time, his time straight. And because some other race that we dealt with had told us how they do it, we were the first time buyers. But another race had told us exactly what they do, and that they park us right next to where this oil, the high potency oil, was. And so we went down and we parked, and then 2 of them came out, and there were guys with guns there. These reptiles, at least they had weapons, and they were standing around. It looked like a big oil rig facility out in the desert, and like a really dark blue sky. The sky was darker than ours is. They came out and got him, and two of the officers went walking with them to go make the deal. And they said, "You guys load these up." And as we loaded up the stuff that we had purchased, we snuck like I want to say 50 barrels, maybe not that many, maybe 30. It was in tens of those barrels of the high stuff. 2 guys had went over and loaded those up onto the ship, and we were super nervous. It was scary, and we got out of there. We flew back and we did it. And he came back, and we flew away. And they said once we were in the air, that they didn't have the capability to catch us, because that double disc was so fast. It was so fast that we were safe. Once we got up and were away, that we were safe. And
how did you get in those barrels of oil if there were guards there?
Because they weren't watching us, because they were patrolling. They were far away, and we just kind of snuck in. The story was that we were going to play stupid and say, "Oh, we thought you meant these." They had it all worked out. They had a bunch of the scenarios worked out. And
so it's all pre-planned, right? They knew where the barrels were going to be.
Plus, we were a first-time buyer, and he was promising them we were going to come back and buy all this stuff with big money. So they were trying to be, "Oh, you guys go ahead, just help." There was a relationship dynamic in there that they were playing up. And then so we took off and never went back. We straight up ripped them off and never went back. They took enough of that oil to try to break it down. And I heard that later that they couldn't figure it out, that nothing happened. That basically they didn't get anything out of that. At least that's what they told me. That's what the official story was later. But that was my second away mission. That was the second time that I went, left my post and did something else other than my job that I did every single day. That was the second time that happened.
And so, what's interesting still about this to me, Tony, is it still interests me. I can't take it in. It's this whole thing about just the Germans and them being there and us not being part of it. And from what I'm hearing, from all of this disclosure that I'm getting elsewhere, since Paperclip, and there's been other projects, it's either this guy's not got the information, or we've not really done a lot. It's not been a massive amount of development in the US and in the UK, from what I'm hearing. In terms of, I'd have had an expectation, right, that we'd have fleets, man. You know, like,
So, it's my understanding there's like a United Nations fleet, and I've met people that have spoke about serving with the UN in a Secret Service. That was the word they used. I was in the Secret Service, and went on to talk about all. And I think that it's fractured up there. Like how many countries are on the Earth now? There was 200 and something. There's less now, but we have all these countries on the Earth. They each have their own mechanisms for ruling. Many of them have their own military. They have their own navy. A lot of countries. I think the colonies up there are the same way. Each one is their own country. Like I happen to serve in the breakaway German one, but they're not all like that, and they definitely are not like we weren't allowed in many places in the solar system up there. When we were up there were many places we were not allowed to go, and that's because each one has its own thing. They're all in competition with each other, the same way that the countries are down here. It's kind of the same relationship as the world has. You want there to be a United Nations. You'd love it if there was one big country, but would you? Because right now there's no one country that really has.
That goes to one world order, right? And if you
I'm really scared of a world order because that means we're just super oppressed.
But like, it depends on the beliefs of the world order, right? And it depends on who runs the world order, and it depends on what's put through that new world order, and it depends on a lot of things. And if you take this up and up and up, and go into confederations and star systems and the management of our 4 star systems of where we sit with our universe being inside our solar system being inside one of those star systems, and there being a confederation that manages 4 star systems, and those 4 star systems are built on free will. If you go that I mean, the research that I'm doing now and where I'm getting to in terms of how things are being run, not here, but when we go up and up much higher levels in terms of ascension, and where those planets, where those confederations are founded, and who are part of those confederations, right? And all this stuff is going to come out for esoteric disclosure. It's all stuff that I've been researching very, very heavily, just to really try and bring this to the people, right? Is there are things that we're finding out now, and there are stories that we're hearing about large beam weapons being used, about uncovering nuclear bases that are under the earth before certain things can happen. There are bigger plans that are happening with the people that made us as a human race, right? If you go back to Sumerians and Andromedans and you start to look into these different races of people and where we were created, that I believe there is a bigger picture to this, Tony, right? And I think that sanction, that German sanction that you were in, is a part of this. But I believe what you find, and I think happens, is that you said breakaways, right? Okay, I found this new technology. I've worked this out. You can't stop me from now using it. So I'm going to go and I'm going to use it now.
Right.
And this is what the race all comes down to, with all these different countries, Tony, that are all competing against each other to get to the dark side of the moon, like the Chinese did, right? And to be able to get to make a ship that can travel to different places. Do you see where I'm coming from? It's this whole competition.
Well, you know what? There was a lady that did an interview. I don't remember her name, and I saw it some years ago. It's an old interview, but she's not into the whole ufology thing. She was into money, watching the money, and she uncovered black ops money. Like, she was tasked with auditing where the money was going, and what she uncovered was that she said that, number one, everything that it's a what do you call it, a one-way mirror. Our financial system is like, you don't know where you spent all your money last year, but they do. They know every single transaction we make. So they know who's buying what, when, and why. They know what's going, where the money goes. And once you have that data, then you can control everything. Now you know what the hot seller is. You know, and of course you're rich. You can be rich. She said that what it is she found that the banking system all works together. All the credit cards, they all work together to maintain that data, and that it's a one-way. And they've made laws against it. We can't access our own spending. I don't know where you spent your money last year, and you don't know where I spent mine, but they do. And what she said was she uncovered documents because she went and got congressional power to go and investigate, you know, for the money, you know, at her level that she was at. There's a talk about it. I'll dig the name up and get it to you later. And she said that she found a communique that said that because of the political system in America, these people couldn't get anything done. So they were going to move all the money to China. Because China's a one-party system. Yeah. So the government structure would be much easier, and it's to fund the space program. She said it's trillions of dollars. It's not billions, it's trillions of dollars that's funded of black money that's funding the space program. Right?
Which we now know that's $7 trillion.
She said that she found a communique that says it's just going to be easier for them to do it with China than the United States. And back when that happened was like or 90 something in the 90s. And what's happened since then? Everything's made in China. All the money's going to China. You know what I mean? Like everything's going to China right now. And China's, lo and behold, who's landed on the moon and heading back up? They talk about a manned mission to the moon here in a minute. You know, so that's maybe the Chinese are going to disclose. Maybe that's what's going to happen. The Chinese are going to go up there and they're going to have the official story amongst the Chinese, and it's going to percolate to us. That we're going to be sitting here going, "Well, we never knew that." You know, who knows? You know, but basically because of the difficulty of the political structure, because of the Constitution, for the space program to take money from America is where it began. So they just grew up like that. Now they found an easier way to do that in a communism.
Yeah, and it's just mad, right? So let's go back into your story. So you said that was the second time that you had left your post to do what you normally do. So how many other times are there that you can recall?
Well, there was one other one, and this was a year later probably. Okay. This was not a dangerous mission. They came to me. This was something that the captain did, and it was not a mission of high probability of danger. It was something that, the captain had tapped me to be on the mission as a reward, and he made up a job for me to do on it. And so it was another planet. I don't know where. And what it was a society like ours. These were the rats. They were people that looked more like a rat than a human. It was a human, you know, like a human face. They were small. They were not even 100 pounds. They had tails, and they had gray hair. You know, like a rat. He was like a rat. I mean, he wasn't a rat per se, but if I had to say something, if I had to say something that he resembled. It resembled a rat, a rat man, and I've talked about it before. I've got a few artist drawings of rough sketches that are kind of close, but anyhow, we went there and they were setting them up to trade some kind of it was a planet like ours that was unaware of life above, you know, life extraterrestrial life. Yeah. Our society right now is unaware of extraterrestrial life as a whole. This planet was the same way. And so we had to sneak in and go and meet with a member of their military, and he had some kind of some chemical, or it was like a rare ore or something that he wanted to trade, and he had tons of it. The boxes were like I want to say 6 by 6 by 8 of these like graphite-looking boxes, and he had 600 of them worth of this ore, whatever it was that he wanted to trade with us. For a piece of technology. He wanted to trade tech, and he was going to go off and be rich. It was somebody within the military on this planet. It was a side deal, and somehow the Germans had made contact with him. So what we did was we went to Diego Garcia and we picked up an LCAC, one of the Marine hovercrafts, and they had cut it down the middle and cut sections out of it and made it something like 10 feet narrower so it would fit in our main cargo bay, in the rear cargo bay of the ship. They had to cut the thing and cut it in half, and they spent millions of dollars doing it. We went to Diego Garcia and picked it up, and then we went to that planet, and the officers came that day, that morning of the job, and they gave me a pad. Instead of I had a notepad. I always carried around a clipboard with notes. They gave me a pad, and what it was all I had to do was put in the measurements of the box and the weight, and it would say how many we could fit on our ship per trip. It was going to work out how many trips that LCAT could carry, and that was my whole job for the ride. They also picked up 2 servicemen. They picked up a guy that had known that they were going to have their memories erased after the mission. These were guys from Diego Garcia. They were United States military. I think I want to say one was a Marine and one was an Air Force, but I'm not sure. Well, I know one was a Marine, and he was the pilot of it. Both of them knew how to fly it, but one was the other guy's superior. So the pilot was in flying, and the other guy sat out, and the Germans kind of picked on him. Like, they talked down to him. They really, because he was going to have his memories erased. So they treated him bad. He got like hazed by the Germans during the mission, And so we flew out, and it was a swamp. So the ship let down out to sea, and it was 40 minutes it took us to get in. We had to go through a swamp, and there were like all kinds of dead trees sticking up out of the swamp. It was a stinky. They told me the water was poisonous, that if you fell in the water, it was poison, in this swamp for whatever reason. And we eventually ended up on land, and we landed, and we met this guy, and we stayed there. We were there, I want to say an hour and a half, something like that. The captain, that was the other thing, is that was the only time I ever went back to my cell in my room that I had in a possession. The day before, the captain had gave me a digital watch to wear, and I went back to my cell, and I took my watch off and put it in my drawer, and I was happy. I was like, I finally had a possession that I could put inside my drawer that belonged there, that belonged to me for that mission. Because he was really obsessed with time, and he kept saying it over and over again. He said, if we don't get back on time, we will have never left. Because of the paradox, because of the way that they did their missions. So everybody had a watch, and he was very obsessed with time. The captain was always looking, the captain of the ship was always in charge of time, how much time it took to do one thing or another. We were there about an hour. It took me all of 2 minutes, man, to sit. I measured one of the boxes, and I put it in that pad, and I had the number, and that was it. My whole job, my whole reason I went on that mission was less than 2 minutes.
Why do you think he made the job up for you?
It was a reward. He liked me. He said it a lot. He said he liked me a lot.
This is the captain of this bigger ship that you were on, right?
The MVL, the captain of the MVL. Yep. There were a few times when he pulled me aside after the morning briefing, and he made me stay. And he would tell me, he said, I don't know how you ended up in your position. Mostly people are prisoners that end up doing your job. He said, but I know you didn't deserve it. He said it to me. He would say it to me. A few of the command crew, they always said, they would give me the good job from time to time. Like, good job, man. And they would say, you know what, you don't deserve whatever happened to you to get here, whatever happened to you to be where you're at, you didn't deserve it.
So can I ask you a question now? How much research have you done on the kid that you did the telepathy stuff on, that you told him was really ugly, and then you think that his dad put you in the 20 years and back? How much work?
I found I did a little bit, yeah.
Do you want to elaborate?
Well, many years ago, before I got the bulk of my memories that made sense, like I always had the fragmented memories. I knew that I was taken. I remembered him and what happened. I remembered being taken. I remember the weirdness the day after, and the other kids. I remembered all that stuff. I remember having an ET in my face. Yeah. And so many years ago, before I got that main recall back, I found him and I emailed him. Yeah. And I told him, I said, I asked him, did you go to my school at such and such time back in, if so, we might be friends. And he emailed me back. He said, nope, it doesn't ring a bell to me. That's what he said. And I said, well, that's a shame, because if you're who I think you were, I wanted to apologize, and I was hoping we could be friends. And I said, take care, thanks for your time. And that was the email I sent him. But it was him. I found him. You know, it was him.
You think it was him? Yeah. So I'm just what I'm looking at is that was actually a comment from someone that we had on the channel called Jan Day, who'd actually asked you specifically. She put here, have you looked up the young boy from the science fair, the one whose confidence you ruined and whose father was behind your 20 and back? And
Yeah,
also, how are your family dealing with this? So you kind of covered that. You think you found him. How are your family dealing with this? And
a lot of my family I don't tell. Like in my own personal Facebook page, I've made it where people can't post, and my family doesn't know. Well, you know, my brother and my sister knows, and you know, my daughters. But for the most part, I don't tell people because I don't think it's. In order for someone to believe what I talk about, they have to unbelieve something that we all believe. Face it. You have to give something up. In order to entertain that any of what I'm telling you is true, you're gonna have to give something up. You're gonna have to discover that the world isn't what you think it is. That they don't give a shit about you and that you're actually a piece of property to somebody. And we're talking about reptiles. So in order for me to do that, that's kind of bogus for me to force that on somebody. There have been a few people that I've dropped my story on that didn't ask for it. And for the most part, it's not cool. You know, like I don't think it's cool.
They don't take it, Tony. You know, Jordan Maxwell said something that was, if you shine a light on someone when they're asleep, the first thing they do is say, "Get it off me." You keep shining
light out of here.
They get more aggressive. That's
exactly right.
And then they get to a point where they want to hit you, right?
Yep. And if you keep shining it. Yep. That's true. That's exactly what it was like. And so I don't tell anybody. I will tell anybody that asks. People that come to me and ask, sure. That's been the premise. Every interview I've ever done, they've asked me. I haven't sought out one interview. Really. I haven't sought out not one.
Now, I found you, man. I found you, and I found
people have asked me because you want the info, because that means you want it. But it's not. It's totally not cool for me to go and post that in my family's Christmas party stuff. You know what I mean? Hey, check out my interview.
You become a preacher, and this is the biggest problem that I have talking about the spiritual awakenings and enlightenments that I've had, is that you go and try and say this to people that aren't interested, and they think that you're some sort of, you think you're something special above everyone else that's a preacher, right?
And like you said, right, exactly, and they take it like an attack.
Yeah.
Because you're also attacking their beliefs.
Sure, you know? And that's the reason they
find out on their own. Yeah.
Sure. Cool, man. So we've covered a lot. I think we've massively diversified, and we had we've had.
This was like a talk show.
Yeah, sure. But we've had some really great comments about our diversifying throughout the comments that are on the videos, right? And a lot of people have said that they really like the diversifying as well as the facts, right? And it's nice to get a bit of a window into who you are, Tony, as well, right? And a little bit about your beliefs and what you see as being real. And, you know, this society that we live in is so corrupt and it's so infiltrated that everybody's trying to decipher what's true and what isn't, right? And this is the point of disclosure. So I think you and I need to regroup because we've gone off on so many different tracks. So hopefully we can arrange to talk again. Before we go live, we'll restructure, I think, Tone.
You know, I want to say this, that I haven't been able, I'm really starting to go back on my recent work and go through the comments and try to respond. There's been a bunch of comments that I wanted to respond. Like I've been on my phone and flip through, and then I see the comments and I want to respond, but I'm on my phone and I know it's going to be a long response. And there's a people that had legitimate questions that I want to answer, but I'm going to try to make an effort on this interview and our other ones to go through and hit them and try to get back with people about some things, because I think that's important.
No, I agree with you, man. I agree with you. And thanks so much for coming on, mate. I really appreciate it. I know we're running low on time now. It's really late here for me, and I've got to go to work tomorrow. It's probably not as late for you. What is it like?
It's 20 to 6 right now, but I've got another one coming up at 6.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm coming up 11:15, man. So I'm getting tired.
Yeah.
So listen, dude, thank you so much. Thanks from all the listeners at Esoteric Disclosure. We thank you so much for coming on board. I can't thank you enough, man. And let's try and get this expose on the replicas, right? So I've given you the whole thing about the film. Let's get.
I'm gonna go see it this week. I'll make sure I watch it this week. I'll get back with you, man. We'll talk.
Yeah,
that's good stuff. That's good.
Yeah, man, we'll expose that. Definitely. Yep. And yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Tony. All right, mate. I'll let you get on. Thank you so much, and we'll catch up with you soon. Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon. Take care, everybody. Cheers. Good night.